Welcome to My Wine Day, a celebration of Moldova's National Wine Day, presented to you virtually during this unprecedented global webinar and masterclass. We are just about to begin, but before we do, a few quick housekeeping notes. As attendees, you will all be muted for the duration of the webinar. However, you will see on your screen that there are two channels for you to communicate with other attendees and pose questions to the panelists. First is a chat section. So the chat section is an informal way for you to communicate with other guests. Just be sure to select everyone, all panelists and attendees in the to field, as it can default to panelists only. Second, the Q&A section. This is where we ask you to please submit any questions you may have for the panel to be answered during the webinar. If you find yourself with streaming issues, you may want to encourage other members of your household to log off the internet and avoid simultaneous streaming to save bandwidth. And you may also want to log out and try again with another internet server, such as Firefox or Chrome. This webinar is being recorded, and all of you will receive a link to the video recording in the following days. And the event is also currently streaming live on the Wine of Moldova Facebook and YouTube channels, as well as the My Wine Day landing page. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers today. And before we bring on the esteemed panel that we see here, we are very pleased to introduce our moderator for today, London-based wine writer, lecturer, and judge, Jamie Good. And from Moldova, Irina Bistrici, Deputy Director of the National Office of Wine and Vine of the Wine of Moldova, and Chef and Sommelier, Mihail Juta. The three will give a brief welcome to get the conversation started. So Irina, Mihail, and Jamie, we turn the screen over to you.
Hello, everybody. Hello, friends of Wine of Moldova. We are happy to welcome more than 100 participants of this webinar who have already registered, and thousands of people who are watching us from so many different countries. Already for 19 years, Wine of Moldova holds a fantastic event. This is the National Wine Day, which is the brilliant occasion of celebrating the millennial traditions of culture, of winemaking in our country. This year, the 19th edition, because of pandemic situation, we cannot celebrate it on the normal way in the central square of the capital of Chisinau, but we have transformed it in online event, and we call it My Moldovan Wine Day. Did you know that Moldova has the highest density of vineyards in the world and also the largest cellars in the world? Perhaps for many people, Moldova is even hard to find on a map, but still we export more than 90% of all we produce, all wines that we produce. And why? Because it has a very good quality and fabulous indigenous grape varieties. Today, around Jamie Good, journalist and TV man from UK, and with 9 panelists from 9 different countries, 9 wine experts, we will try 4 excellent Moldovan wines, and we will try to discover Moldova. And also we will share our wine day, our National Wine Day, with the whole world. So let's try Moldovan wines and say Noroc.
Noroc. Can I tell you also some words? Today, it's a very important day for all the winemakers from Republic of Moldova. A lot of wine events has been cancelled due to a specific situation in the world, and it's a chance for them, for the specialists from wine area, to promote Moldovan wines and to promote the work of wine producers. I hope that everybody who are watching us and listening us to know better the wine of Moldova and to discover some specific and interesting facts. I hope that today we will speak and we will have some interesting questions about our wine team, great wine team.
So my job today is to moderate this panel. I've got a really great set of people from around the wine globe. But first of all, just a very brief introduction to Moldova, which I mean is a journey of exploration for me as well. It's a wine region that many of us are discovering. And as Irina said, the amazing fact is that of all the countries that have vineyards, Moldova has the highest proportion of land giving over to vineyards in the world, and there are 112,000 hectares planted at the moment, which, to use a comparison, that's about 15,000 hectares more than South Africa, which is considered to be a major wine producing country. 50 different grape varieties grown. The split is roughly 70% red, 30% white. 70% of the grapes grown are international varieties, and that's a legacy of the time when a lot of the vineyards were being expanded. But a lot of the interest now is in the native, local and regional varieties that have got a long history there that I think people from outside the country find quite interesting. And there's a lot of history of wine in Moldova. There was kind of a bit of a bottleneck with the Soviet era. Lots of big factory wineries sprung up to supply wines to Russia. But since 2005, Moldova's focus has been away from the Russian market and the particular wines that were preferred by the Russian markets. The style has changed and it's become a very export-focused industry. And 95% of all the wines that are produced in Moldova leave the country. 40% of them go to the EU. And I think it's a country that's got a lot of potential. And that's what we're going to explore and discover in this webinar. We've got 4 wines to try, so we'll intersperse a discussion about Moldova with the tasting of the wines, and they're interesting wines. I've been through them all already, and this is a really interesting journey of exploration for me, and I hope it is for you as well. So I'm going to introduce the panelists in alphabetical order. First of all, Andre Devold, and if Andre, you can switch your camera on. So Andre is a wine specialist and author from Denmark. Then we have Chung Tao Se, who's a wine and gastronomy journalist who's based, he covers Taiwan and China, so another part of the world. Then we have Frank Smulders, who's a Master of Wine consultant and educator based in the Netherlands. Hello, Frank. And Jacques Oran, MS, who is a lecturer and author based in Quebec in Canada. So it's going to start getting cold there soon, I guess. Next, we have Julia Scavo, who is a sommelier based in France. Then we have Mark Van Helmor, who is a wine and gastronomy journalist based in Belgium and France. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
And then we head to the United States of America for Michelle Williams, who is a wine, food, and travel writer. It's always good when people turn up on the screen. It's good, isn't it? And last but not least, by any means, we have Robert Joseph, who is a very well-known wine consultant, recovering wine journalist and winemaker based in the UK. Maybe Robert's gone out for a cup of tea or something. Oh, he's there. Excellent, excellent, good. So that's everyone, I think. That's the whole crew. Katie, could you show the map to give some context? So this is, not everybody is aware of where Moldova is. If you look at the map there, it's really well situated for viticulture. It's a prime spot, it's in southeastern Europe, and it's sandwiched between Romania and Ukraine in the Black Sea basin. So the latitude is roughly 46 to 48 degrees. And if we could zoom in a little bit. So that's the 3 main wine regions marked there on the map. And you can see that the presence of the Black Sea there is kind of helpful because that's a moderating factor, because the winters can get kind of cold in a continental area like this. And but between 46 and 48 degrees is just perfect for viticulture. It's a prime spot. Many of the world's famous wine regions are on the same sort of latitude. And also it's got good soils. The soils are very suitable for viticulture. So it's one reason why we have so many vineyards here. It's a good place to grow wine grapes. So let's get on with our discussion. And the first question I've got is for Robert. You've spent quite a bit of time in Moldova. I believe you've been going there for a number of years. So, what is your impression of the wine scene now, its position and evolution, and potential future directions?
I'll be very brief because we've got a lot of people. But basically, I first went to Moldova in 1988 when it was still under the Soviet regime, and I've seen a complete blossoming since then, and especially over the last 10 or 15 years. And I think that what's been the impact of a young generation, and we're going to see one of the wines here in our tasting reflects that. We've got a whole group of young winemakers who are coming up. We've got some big wineries that we've actually got, for example, Porcari and Bartelli, who are doing a lot of good work. But I think that the thing that I'm very fascinated in has been the work that has been done in Moldova, and to me what sets Moldova apart is not its indigenous grapes and not its international grapes, but the combination of the two. I think the Moldovans are some of the best blenders in the world of grapes from their own history and international grapes. And given what they've got in their vineyards, and you'll see that in some of the wines we're tasting today, I think that there is huge potential for them to create unique, complex wines that no one else in the world can do because of what they've got. The climate, by the way, is also one of the great climates in the world to make wines. It's a very, very easy place to grow grapes.
Great, that's really cool. I'm sure we'll come back to this then, talking about the future directions again a little later. But Andre, I'll hand this one over to you. I mean, what's your experience been like of Moldovan wine, and how would you like to see the wine scene develop there?
Well, my experience is a lot more recent because I only went to Moldova last year in August, I believe, for a week. And before that, I have to admit, I hadn't tasted one single bottle of Moldovan wine. So at least I knew that they made wine in Moldova, but I have to admit, I had to look at the map to situate the country. And speaking of this situation of the country, we did, of course, we visited a lot of producers. We did some nice tastings. And one of the more interesting tastings was where the wines were divided into regions. And I'm sure we're going to talk about these regional characteristics. And it's very interesting. But for now, I think that Moldova has to focus on really the country as the brand Wine of Moldova, instead of the specific regions or the specific PTIs.
And Frank, would you agree with that? Do you think that, in terms of Moldova, the first thing is to actually get people familiar with Moldova itself?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I've been to the country once, and after that I also did some tastings for wines of Moldova, and I mean the quality was each time quite impressive. But it is indeed quite unknown territory, except for a few outside markets. I mean, in Romania, of course, there's a good link with the neighbor country, and there is a market in Russia, as difficult as it is sometimes. But if you look at Europe, then Moldova, people know there's wine coming from Moldova. But most people wouldn't know where the country has been heading for in recent years, so they wouldn't know the great steps that have been made forward. And I think indeed the first step should be that people get to realize that there's such tremendous quality coming from the country. And indeed, after that, the next step would indeed be to promote the different regions, because there is regional difference. That's absolutely true.
Jacques, I'll hand this one over to you. I mean, do you think that the emphasis should be on the indigenous varieties? I know that people are talking, they're saying, well, if you're going to the export market, have a point of difference, and indigenous varieties represent a point of difference. Do you think that that's the direction to go, focusing on indigenous varieties, or do you think, as Robert was suggesting earlier on, blends could be the answer? And you need to unmute.
Okay, it's okay now. Yes, first I would like to share my opinion. You know, it was my first time when I went to Moldova last year in October, 1 year ago exactly. And as my colleague, we have visited a lot of wineries, and during this trip, I had the chance to taste many wines from Moldova, and I've been impressed, really impressed with this vineyard, this beautiful vineyard with good peoples. And one thing we have to say, I think, that as in the vineyards, as in the cellars, they got good equipment to work in really good conditions. Really good conditions now. And I'm sure there's a big difference between 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and now. And to your question, I agree totally with our friend from London, with Robert, because I share, after all those testings, I think with Mihail too, we had the chance to taste together many wines during a great evening together. And really, I think, and we're going to talk about tasting a little bit later, the blend with local varieties and international, it gives really good results, I think, and good finesse in the wines too, with the personality of the local varieties.
Okay. Julia, can I hand this one over to you as well? I'd love to know, because you've spent a bit of time in Moldova, you know it quite well. You know, what's your view on this whole sort of variety discussion?
Yes, well, actually, I just went once to Moldova, but being Romanian, I had quite a good contact with Moldovan wines, because we are a good market for Moldovan wines. And I strongly believe, as in any case for any country, that if local varieties exist, they should be a focus. And I think this is the case for Moldova, with whom we share local varieties. Actually, these local varieties are common to the whole Romanian-speaking space, and I first came into contact with these varieties in Romania, then in Moldova, and I saw the differences between the two expressions of these varieties on both sides of the Prut, of the river that makes our frontier. And I think that the clonal adaptation of certain so-called local varieties is very interesting to the Moldovan area. Let's take, for instance, the Rara Neagră, which really is pushed to pinnacle in Moldova, and we are more clumsy with it in Romania, where we call it Fatasca Alba. But it's a really success in Moldova, because they really choose the good clones. If they make red, if they make rosé, if they use it for blend. It's the same for the Fatasca Alba, which is fewly represented today in Moldova, but it starts getting up. I mean, compared to Romania, where we have basically 12,000 hectares, and they have like 300-400 hectares. But the quality of the Fatasca Alba I tasted in Moldova really interesting, because it gets more freshness, more finesse, and it's more used as a single varietal than in blends as we make it in Romania. Fatasca Regala is also interesting, because as a quite phenolic grape can have a very interesting adaptation for gastronomy, whites with potential for aging, and can also be a compound in blends as well. And yeah, I noticed these differences for these common local varieties of what I would call Romanian speaking space, and of course local becoming local nowadays. Since 2000 they are reconquering Moldova, and I think they have a big potential, and Moldovans should focus on them in monovarietals, but also as they do it really well in blends, because as Robert mentioned, they are very good blenders, and this is a very interesting feature, because we find these local varieties blended with international or Caucasian varieties, and really congratulations for that.
Okay, well, I think it's about time that we started to look at some of the wines, and starting with the first wine, which will appear on the screen fairly soon. Michael, could you tell us a little bit about this first wine that we're tasting, which is the...
So today we're going to taste Harapalb. It's an interesting wine because it's 2 red grapes, but the winemaking, it's a white winemaking. It's a small producer. Harapalb, it's a fairy tale from Moldovan, let's say, old folklore, and it's have a very specific thing. It's a small producer, like I tell you. So when we are speaking about wines from Moldova, it's not just big producer. We have a very perfect example of a small one, and it's a Cabernet Sauvignon and Fatasca Alba. So 2 red grapes. Let's put a little bit in for me in the glass. Very nice aromas. For me, it's very fresh, very light. The producer is small. It's calling Dan Prisacaro, and it's make. It was the idea was he have some little and small children, and he are telling the fairy tales, and appear the idea to make such kind of wine, which is a little bit different from the classic one, and to use red grapes and to make a white light wine. Colleagues, any opinion? Tell us.
Yeah, Chung Tao, what do you think of this wine? What's your impression?
Honestly, I'm quite impressed by the quality of this wine because I have no idea about Moldova wine before. I've never been there. I've never been in this country. I don't have no idea about your culture, and but I like it's a full body. I think for people come from Asia, I think this kind of wine will be very nice with our Asian street food. I think they can combine with so many street food, Asian street food, with even with the spicy. I think it will be very nice. And when the weather is very hot, and I think this the full body and very fruity, very fresh. It's very nice.
Yeah, I'm impressed with this. I think I like the innovation. I love the packaging. I think it looks like a really smart, sophisticated, high-end wine. Mark, what did you think of this wine?
This one is very curious. Why 2 black varieties to do a white wine? I think it doesn't have white varieties in his vineyard, maybe. Because so, yes. I taste the 4 wines this Monday, and now this the same wine. So 6 days open is really good. But for me, it's more a wine in structure than in aromas. It's more in structure. You have tannins, salinity, and that is very good for food. I think it's more most done for food than for doing in aperitif. Aperitif is good, but you have others wine in Moldova for aperitifs. That is very good for food and very spicy food. Mm. I tried that yesterday with couscous. It was very good. Yes.
And Julia, did you have your hand up earlier?
Yes, yes. Because Moldovan cuisine in Belgium don't exist. It doesn't exist.
Julia, did you raise your hand earlier? I just noticed.
Yes. So 2 things. Well, I think the branding is very interesting because I know that Dan Prisacaro also makes other fairy tale characters, names of the cuvée. And Harapalb, it's an initiatic story. It's like the magical flute of Romanian-speaking space, and it's about a prince that really transforms himself through an initiation. And I think we are initiated by this wine because we expect something more phenolic, but actually the wine, it's surprising. It doesn't get that green side of red made into blanc de noir, because sometimes we have to pick them earlier, so you don't have any pyrazine, any greenish style of the Cabernet Sauvignon that sometimes when it's made into Blanc de Noir could get into a kind of Sauvignonish style. And then you have the Fatasca background that brings a lot of fruitiness, and you don't catch the phenolics. You just catch the fruits and you don't catch the phenolics. All that density, that vibrancy, that energy that comes on the finish, I think is due to the batonnage and the lazy character. And it's definitely, as Mark said, something for gastronomy, for pairing, for eating with. And yeah, I most appreciated this Blanc de Noir more than other Blanc de Noir I tasted either in Moldova or in other countries in Eastern European space.
Robert, I believe you know the producer, yeah?
Yes, I do.
And doing innovative things like this, you know.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that you're now seeing is this group of, and there is a group of young producers, and they're kind of like garagistes, if you would, the old expression in France, if you like. Very small. Some of them are operating in literally industrial parks, and one of them, for example, has got a winery with graffiti all over it. And also there's people making wine for each other or hosting, looking after each other's barrels. It's very dynamic. And I think one of the things I'd say quickly is if you go to Chisinau, it's got a wine bar culture, which is growing quite quickly. And if you go there, get straight off the plane into the city, and you can go into a wine bar and taste a number of these. Somebody, Jeff Burrows, has just mentioned the Atu Winery is one of these wineries where you get this kind of almost punk, but in a good way, wineries. But this is something that's changing literally from year to year. The last 5 years, I'd say, you've seen an explosion of these producers. And if we were in a normal day in Moldova, their National Wine Week, you would be tasting these live with these producers, and that would be a very exciting thing to be doing.
Yeah, I think that's always a really exciting dynamic, and it's really good for a country when you've got people doing small scale projects with, you know, that are driven, they're vocation driven more than anything else. And we've seen that in South Africa very clearly with a lot of the winemakers doing a bit of homebrew on the side, and you know, and that contributes something very, very exciting to the wine culture.
And just one word, labeling. There's a very, you can see this bottle's a little, it's very sophisticated labeling happening in Moldova.
Where is the winery? In Chisinau. In Chisinau, it is in Chisinau, yes. And for me, the little wine vineyard is more interesting than the larger ones. The larger ones. For me, because the wines are more character than the little like Porcari. Porcari is very good. Right? It's well done for the international market, but for the little international markets, I think it's better for the little cavist to have so wines more original with more character, with more identity of Moldova.
Michelle, I realised that we haven't got you in the conversation yet, so it's about time that I asked you a question. And really, I'd just love to know, what is it excites you about Moldovan wine, and also, obviously, the US. What's the US like as a market for Moldovan wine? Is there lots of potential there?
I agree very much with what Mark and Robert have said. I think that the dynamics of the small producers are very interesting. I know that they have a small winery association, correct? That would be a great way to market those wines and be able to import them maybe as a collective unit to the U.S. Because at this point, I don't think most Americans know that Moldova, where it is that they make wine, it hasn't penetrated the U.S. market. In 2018, there was only 2.5% of the bottled wine was exported to the U.S. And I don't know how far the reach of it is. I have a friend who's actually watching today. His name's Jim, and he has a wine blog, and he lives in New York City, which in the United States, you know, is the best place to get wines from everywhere. And he looked high and low this week to try to find a wine from Moldova and was not able to find one. So, you know, there's a lag there, but yet, you know, to your question, Jamie, is the U.S. available to Moldova? Absolutely. They're marketing a lot of, you know, money and time and marketing to educating the industry and then going on from there to the consumers. But in picking up from the conversation about grapes, I'm not sure that the United States necessarily needs another place to source Cabernet wine from. So focusing on the indigenous varieties is very important, and the blends. I think the blends are interesting because a lot of the indigenous grapes, you know, they're unusual names to the American dialect. And so if we have a blend, then it's, you know, a grape they're familiar with, perhaps with a new identity grape, and then you put those together and kind of meet people where they are and then move them solely into the indigenous varieties. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of dynamics. I think the labeling, what everyone has said, would be very appealing to Americans. We're ready. Bring it on.
Do you think that Moldova should be focusing its proposition as being value for money? These are good value for money wines, or do you think Moldova should be, and this is a question to all of you generally in your different markets, or should the focus be on these are high quality boutique wines? And which should be, is it, you know, because it's, you've seen countries go in as the value for money proposition, and then it's almost like the brands obscure the fact that they're from that country. It's just going in as an inexpensive wine. And
it's tricky, I think. Oh, I'm sorry. It's tricky because there's, you know, Chile has done that, and then they had to kind of backtrack and demonstrate that, yes, they're value for money, but they're also very quality wines. You know, there's a lot of value for money wines in the U.S. That come, Portugal, all the different wine regions, and different places in Latin America, some in Australia. So I think that, yes, I tasted the wines last night, and the Purcari, the 2016 Negru de Purcari, that wine is fantastic. I was blown away by how modern it is in some respect, but yet it still kind of has that old world rustic nature that kind of pulls, you know, it's a nice tension. It's really appealing. And when I looked up the price, I couldn't believe how inexpensive it was. So yes, it is value for money, but I'm not sure that that's the right positioning. I think the positioning is more that they're unique and, you know, really food friendly. Americans love food friendly wine because we, you know, eat from all over the world. So, I mean, that's just my perspective. What do the rest of you think?
Yeah, Jacques?
Yes, you know, I can say a few words about the situation in Canada, you know, and the place of the wines from Moldova in Canada, and especially in Quebec. You know, in Canada, it's a big country, and there are monopoly everywhere, almost everywhere. And in Quebec, we have a big monopoly. You know, it's a big province, but only 8.5 million people. And we have around 10,000 different wines on the SAQ, Société des Alcools du Québec. And we have a great choice everywhere, you know, in the province. We have around 400 stores where you can find, so not everywhere, but those wines. So around 10,000 wines, except private importation, okay? And the wines from Moldova arrived in Quebec only 3 years ago. But we have on that time only six different wines. And I repeat again, except private importation, maybe you can find 20, 25 wines in private importation. But on the liquor store, you can find actually 6 wines from 3 white, 3 reds. And the problem for me, I think they should increase the choice with a higher quality level because they have this quality level in Moldova. That's true. Of course, everybody here knows that we taste beautiful wines. And I think, you know, you find wines around in US dollars around $7-8 a bottle. And they could increase the level, the quality level, because the people in Quebec are ready to discover and to like those wines. Because we find good wines, but we have to increase the level, I think.
Right.
You understand with my English? Yes?
Yes, perfect. Yes,
okay.
Perfect. Chantal, Moldova is exporting wine to China for quite a long time now. What sort of presence does Moldovan wine have in China?
My answer will be very disappointing for you because personally, I never seen the Moldova wine in China, either in Taiwan or in Hong Kong. Maybe the quantity is so small. And I asked some of my friends who are the wine lover. They never heard about this wine, so I don't know the Moldova wine in which distribution is in the private club or in the restaurant or in the market. I'm sorry, I never see the people who drink this wine already. So I'm sorry for that.
So let's move on to the second wine. I think that would be a good point. And a second wine, Michael, could you tell us about this?
Yes. It's Individo. It's producer Mo. It's a Fatasca Neagră, local grape variety. It's coming, so we're speaking about free winemaking zone. It's coming from Val lui Traian zone. It's interesting abordation of the winemaking person. It's calling Arkady Foshnia, who I'm making. Here beginning the first on, let's say, recent period to make the wines from local grape variety. And the Fatasca Neagră is a very nice example. It's oak, 12 months it's maturated in oak. And usually it's a French oak. So Fatasca Neagră usually have aromas of red fruits. It's cherry and very nice vanillus aroma. In the taste, it's lighter, but it's a very nice body with very great tannins. And it's, let's say, it's a gastronomical wine because it's pairing very well with some food. Usually we are making some food pairing with this kind of wine. It's local and traditional Moldovan and Romanian food. It's some polenta with a very nice texture, soft texture of some meat. So it needs to be very well cooked. And it's cooking, we are telling it freptura. It's a very, very nice meat, which cooked a little bit more, and it's very soft meat. So the texture of the wine and with the food, it pairs very well.
Frank, what do you think of this wine? Have you got it there?
Yeah, I must say I like that wine. It's got a lot of fruits. It's got a lot of freshness, so it's not heavy at all. It's got quite smooth yet still to some extent grippy tannins. Personally, I think the oak is it's not oaky, but the oak is rather heavily toasted. Maybe there's a bit of that sort of charred wood impression in the wine, which I suppose comes from oak, and that for my taste could be a little bit less heavy-handed. But on the other hand, it's a wine that drinks easily and that yet at the same time has character. So no, it's a really good wine. Yeah.
Yeah. Julia, what do you think of this wine?
And now, a word from our sponsor. Looking to be in the know about Chisinau wines? Want to be the first to know about our new releases and special offers? All you need to do is sign up for our newsletter. There is no commitment necessary, and I promise you we won't spam your mailbox with loads of messages. Need another reason to sign up? Quite possibly the best reason? You'll immediately get a discount code for 10% off your first purchase and be privy to newsletter-only discounts. Let Chisinau Wines turn your moments into great memories. Visit our website, www.chisinauwines.com, or use the link in show notes to sign up. It will take you less than a minute, but the rewards will last a lifetime.
Yes, I've been tasting this wine over the years. The first time, and it was precisely the same vintage, was in 2016, and in 2018. Then last year I tasted another vintage at their place while eating a kind of frittura but revisited way with a little bit of grilled capsicum and stuffed with a very soft meaty stuffing. So it really was a very smooth pairing, and I agree with Mihail, we need to have something either traditional or revisited in this sense. What I think nowadays today about this wine, I like it because it's not extracted, it's not it's full-bodied without being full-bodied. It's full-bodied by the alcohol content because it's 14, and because you have texture. There are some residual sugar, about 3.4 grams, like we usually find in a lot of wines in Moldova. So it gives this smooth attack, this texture, this envelope, but it has tannins without being very elevated, very high. They just feel a little bit grippy, a little bit firm, a little bit reaffirmed by the oak use as well, but it's not extracted. So you still get that drinkability and digestibility. And also there is a hint of tertiary now in this wine, but you still have fruit. You have this cooked fruit, this red and black fruit, and a little bit of capsicum, some spices, and some toastiness, smokiness coming from the wood, which I think it's interesting. It's logically blended with the fruit. And as I said, if you put something a little bit grilled, a little bit toasted, like that capsicum, that red capsicum, which was candied and grilled, it really gives you that smokiness you find in the wine. I think it's an interesting wine. Their range individual is remarkable for the drinkability. This is my opinion.
We've had a question through about could somebody give a brief overview of Moldova's appellations? So Mihail,
yes.
Are appellations important? I know there's the 3 PGIs.
Yes.
Is it important, or are they? Yeah.
It's very important, and so let's say it was a challenge to establish the European approved protection, like geographical indication zone. Inclusive now it's indicated on the label, this PGI zone. So we are speaking about 3 zones. It's Codru, Ștefan Vode, and Valul Traian. So it's 3. This wine which you are tasting is from Valul Traian, so it's the south, and it's a very hot climate. It's a very particular climate there. Let's say, so it's around 2,800 hours of sun. So it's a lot of sun there, and it's a specific zone for red wines. Also, Ștefan Vode, we know the famous, let's say, Purcari zone. We're going to taste this wine, and it's also very well known with the influence of Black Sea and also some particular soil properties. And of course, Codru, it's the biggest zone, which is specific for white wines and also rosé and red wines production.
Great, thank you for that. Let's move on to the third of the four wines, which is the very attractively packaged Negre from Fator. So, Mihail, tell us about this wine.
The wine which have the more quantity of medals. It's a very award international wine. It's 100% of local grape varieties, Fatasca Neagră and Rara Neagră. Such kind of wine you can find just in Moldova, of course. And it's a very interesting blend. It's a producer who also coming from Val lui Traian, south winemaking zone. The wine which have a lot of international awards, and it's like this kind of wine is like a fine wines. It's selling very well in the restaurants, in the specialized shops, and have a very good reputation. And a lot of people who are buying this wine, who are trying this kind of wine, it's coming from the Negri. It's not the second. I thought it's several edition of this, and always it's limited edition. It's also 12 months maturation in French oak, and it's nice, smooth, very well balanced. And we're speaking earlier about this like oaky style of the wines. It's like a traditional, because in our cuisine, it's also people are using a lot of salty, a lot of spicy. So this is like a traditional taste, not something. We like this kind of wine which is maturated in oak. And this is, let's say, a little bit style of winemaker. Of course, it is wines. It's also where it's not oak, but let's say this is their perspective and their view about this kind of wine.
Andre, what do you think of this wine? How do you experience this?
This is actually one of the Moldovan wines that I've tasted several times, and this was one of my favorites during my trip last year. I think it's, I don't know much about vintages in Moldova, but I think 2017 might be a little hotter, the fruit might be a little warmer than I remember it. But of course we are in the southern part of the country, speaking of regions again, and you can feel that. But of course it's very interesting because you have the two local varieties here. And even if the fruit is very mature, you have this very tannic backbone, especially in the finish. The taste, its finish is dry and really tannic without getting too much. I really like it, but I would probably wait one more year, maybe 2 years, and definitely have it with a steak or something with a lot of proteins in it. It's good. It's very good.
Mark, what do you think about this wine?
I agree with Andre. I was with him last year in Moldova in August, and it was one of the first red wine we returned there. And another time we were there Monday and Tuesday, the same wine with a big degustation. And for me, it is one of the best wine, and also for the South country, with very hot country, with very ripe fruit, but with very good structure, with the tannins and with the acidity. And for me, the acidity is with acid and salt. And the two gave, for me, a very good balance with the fruit, and also a little bit old rose, with floral perfume. And yeah, for me, it's a very, very good wine, very good example from the local varieties. And with more character than the precedent, for me, the precedent is a little bit too refined. This one have more character. I prefer that.
Okay, so moving on to the fourth of the wines, Michelle mentioned this earlier. She's got, I believe, the 2016 version. I think most of us have got 2018. Really impressive packaging. Michael, tell us about this famous wine.
So it's a wine which is historical wine. It's we have a legend that this wine obtains a lot of medals and have a very rich history. The wine which won the big gold medal in the Bordeaux contest in 1827. So it's the year of establishment of the winery. So it's a pure philosophy of behind this wine. We have 3 grapes: Cabernet Sauvignon, Saperavi, and Rara Neagra. Saperavi, it's a Georgian grape, but very well integrated in the winemaking zone of Moldova. And it's 18 months oaked wine. So 18 months, it's in also classic French barriques. And the wine have also very good potential for aging. So this kind of wine, we have some specific years, which is it's very particular, and people are searching this kind of wine this year. So for example, for 2016, people are searching this kind of wine. This kind of wine are putting in the private collection, and people are enjoying during the years. It's also different winemaking zone, it's Stefan Voda zone. And this is a perfect example of an international style of wine. So wine competition, a lot of medals, a new approach of wine varieties. So we can tell that it's local varieties because we have Rara Neagra, and we have a modern style of winemaking. And it's also respecting PGI norms. So Stefan Voda region. Which need Moldovan wine to be well known and to be international, to be in international wine scene.
Yeah, what I like about this wine is that it's certainly, it is international in the sense that it's an accessible style, and there's lovely fruit presence, and there's a bit of oak, but also it does have some sort of personality that sets it apart a little bit. It does taste a little bit different, and I quite appreciate that. And I wonder whether the Saperavi component might be adding something to that, because it's such an interesting grape variety. I mean, Michelle, what's your impression of this wine? I think you quite liked it, didn't you?
I liked it quite a bit. Yes. And my after I wrote my tasting notes, when I tasted it yesterday evening, I said, this is the wine. As a Texan, I'm American, but I'm also a Texan. So this is the steak wine with the peppercorn sauce and blue cheese with some sweet potatoes and roasted Brussels sprouts or something like that. That's what this wine can stand up to some California wines. That's why I was saying the tension of it. It's very modern and elegant and polished, and yet there's still kind of that old world rusticness that pulls you back. It really just balances out both very well for me.
And Jacques, do you have this wine? Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting to talk about this wine, because for me, I had the chance to taste the 2016 last year when I was visiting Pourcari. And yesterday, like Michel, I opened my bottle, and we have to say first that we have a little bit less Saperavi in the 2016. I think it's 25% of Saperavi and 70% of Cabernet Sauvignon. But I agree with Michel, it's a beautiful wine because with a touch of Rara Neagra, maybe they could put a little bit more of Rara Neagra in the next vintage maybe. But we have beautiful nose of blackberries, a touch of chocolate. And I think this wine is much better this year, better than last year, 2016. But it's good finesse, good structure, and very well balanced about the acidity. And I found still a touch of graphite. We say graphite, I think. Huh? But last year, the same vintage, it was a little bit more graphite. And now we find the grapes, beautiful tannins, very simple. But I think this one is still young. It's still young. It should be better in 3 or 4 years more. But yesterday night, I drank it a glass with a beautiful fillet of beef, and only like that, and it was wonderful.
Yeah.
Julia.
Yes, I've been experimenting some vintages over this past year because I had the chance to taste it 2011, which is a vintage release, the 2013, the 2015, which is also a vintage release, and this 2018. And I was checking my tasting notes, and indeed the proportion of Saperavi was a little bit less on this other vintages than on the 18, whereas 40%, and on the others was on the 25 range. And I think the Cabernet marked those other vintages, giving also this graphite, as Jacques said, and this backbone of acidity, of tannins. And here with the Saperavi, I think they use a peculiar clone, which is not, or an adaptation to the Moldovan terroir and climate, which has not that rustic grip as the Saperavi we can meet in Georgia. And it brings, on the contrary, something juicier and more finesse than the vintages that are really focused on big backbone, like 70% of Cabernet Sauvignon. But anyway, what I experimented through this small vertical that I tasted in different moments, of course, since October, last October when I was in Moldova, and nowadays when we are virtual in Moldova, is that all these wines have a gorgeous potential for aging. I've always been writing between 8 and 10 and even more than a decade for the vintage releases. And also they are very digest. They have this acidity that sometimes is more balanced by the residual sugar or the alcohol in other brands, like Photo, for instance, where alcohol is a bit more generous, where there's a let's say a smoother attack. But here, even if you have 3 grams of sugar, you don't feel them as a smooth attack. You just perceive this digestibility, this freshness, the tannic grip, which is very refined, always fine-grained, and the oak maturing is particularly well integrated, even if we have 18 months and the wine is really, really young. This 2018, we are tasting most of us. And I think it can really suit, as Michelle said, something, let's say, a more Texan style, but also pigeon, squab, even duck breast in a very fine dining style, with cherries, with morello cherries, something like licorice, or a very fine spice like cinnamon, very smooth puree like sweet potatoes. So I think it really fits in a fine dining contest as well.
Right. Robert.
Just very briefly, so I know we're near the end. I'd just like to make one point that I think the quality of winemaking, we can talk about the grapes, we can talk about the regions. I think Moldova, and I think people here have visited Moldova, I think there is some very, very sophisticated winemaking going on there. You can see that in the Purcari wines, not this just one, but in a number of their wines. But I think across these 4 bottles, you can see that there's some very good thinking going on at the level of the winemaking. There's work to be done in the vineyards. There's a lot of work to be done. I think there's huge scope for improvement in Moldova. I think the Moldovans themselves would admit that. But I think that what we have seen has been the equipment in the winery, as you've heard, is already very much state of the art. And I think that as each year goes on, I'm seeing that quality of winemaking being applied more and more successfully to more and more interesting grapes that are coming in. So I think Moldova is definitely work in progress at already a very high level. And I think the Purcari is a very good example of the sort of the flagship of the country. Inevitably, it's the one that's the longest history, but I think it's showing a lot of other wineries what they could do And maybe, to Mark's point, there'll be ones that are maybe more characterful or less international, you might say, that will please the caviste more. But as Michelle said, this, if you want to be in a restaurant in Texas or New York, you put this on a table, and I think somebody's going to be very, very happy to buy it.
Thank you. That's really good. And I think that's a really good point for us to draw our proceedings to a close. We've done an hour. It's gone very quickly. I just really want to thank all of you for your contributions. And I've certainly just really enjoyed talking, discussing, and tasting these wines, which I think, are 4 very interesting place markers for different directions that the wine scene is taking in Moldova. And I've tried a couple of others recently. I tried a very impressive Chardonnay and a remarkable sparkling wine from Bucharest, which was like very, very high quality. And I was just taken aback by it. So yeah. So on that note, I'd like to raise a glass to toast National Wine Day.
Cheers.
Cheers. How do we say cheers?
Cheers.
Cheers to
Norak.
Norak.
Norak is great.
This has been another episode of Exploring the Wine Glass. Thanks for listening. If you have suggestions on what topics you would like me to discuss, please reach out on social media. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as Exploring the Wine Glass. I'm also on LinkedIn as Lori Hoytbud. Of course, you can always email me at exploringthewineglass@gmail.com. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe to help others find me more easily. And most importantly, tell your wine-loving friends, because if you like the podcast, they will too. Music is Wine by Kivens. Until next week, Slancha.
Give me the wine.